Call the meeting to order at 4:31. And the first thing we need is somebody to volunteer as the clerk for the day. Thank you, Stephanie, for doing it 2 days in a row. Is it possible for either Lindsay or Peter to take that on?
Yeah, I can do it.
Wonderful, Peter. And, mainly what we want is decisions that are made, votes that are taken, exactly what the motion is, who made it, et cetera. And then I can always help with the editing. Usually what we do is the clerk will send me the minutes and I can check it over to the best of my ability, and then we send it out. Does that sound okay?
The last one gives a good outline of what it should look like.
Good.
Yeah.
You
okay.
did.
I will send it to you first, obviously.
Yeah, you can definitely use that as now. Okay, so we'll call to order at 4:31. And Peter, thank you very much. And we have nobody from the public that I'm aware of on our meeting. Communications, I have not received any communications from citizens in regards to our agenda items and topics. Did anybody else receive anything that we should all be aware of?
No.
Okay. And then we need an approval of the minutes for October 28th. Does somebody want to make a motion to approve?
I motion to approve the minutes of the 28th. Stephanie?
Stephanie. Lindsay
I'll
will
second that.
Great. Is there any discussion on those minutes before we approve them? Everybody's okay?
Mhm.
Great. So all those in favor of approving the minutes, and you'd say your name, and we'll take a vote from all four of you, all three of you and me. Stephanie, you want to start?
Stephanie, aye.
Sure, I.
Lindsay, aye.
And Alice, aye. Okay, great. Unanimous approval of those minutes. Great. So I thought we'd start our meeting with sort of a debrief, hearing from all of you in regards to your thoughts on was everybody in attendance on the November 5th? Stephanie was, Peter?
Yes.
Lindsay, yeah, great. And Neff as well. So we should debrief, and with thoughts in mind of ensuring, and time is running out, to send any comments or suggestions that we have to Lev Malakoff and or George, including our thoughts on the prioritization list, which, as it stands now. So I did make my list of shuffling around that I was going to send just from myself, as well as a reminder again to what the committee had decided should be priorities. And then I thought that all of you might want to do the same, to send in. But in the meantime, if we have any communal thoughts that we'd like to send, I'm happy to do that. So does anyone want to start with sort of a debrief of how the meeting went, what questions you might still have, what comments that you'd like to share?
Well, for me, it was basically a learning experience, Alice, and it was very interesting to see how the Cape Cod Commission works with the local group to come up with the overall plan and the priority. So I was impressed. It was very interesting. But I don't have any substantive comments to make at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Stephanie. I found that the breakout sessions at the end were the most informative because we were able to ask specific questions about ongoing projects. And one of the big questions that I had was where we've been talking about different additional funding sources for projects like ADA funding, CPC funding, and complete streets. We had a good discussion on what the opinion was of the Cape Cod Commission of whether it was a good idea to try to combine funds. And they thought that was an excellent idea. They thought that going forward to combine funding sources from various other places like this safe schools, safe streets to schools, and complete streets was an excellent way to go. And so they were very, very encouraging about that, which I was very happy to hear. And what they also talked about was the fact that many of the projects that were listed really are much larger than what the goal of the Complete Streets program is. And they felt things like the sidewalks on Main Street and anything with going down to Nauset Beach. They felt they were excellent things to go after, but they didn't see it as fitting into the Complete Streets program because it was such a large project. It was more, should be like the town DPW type of being the ones to go after a lot of that. So I thought that was very interesting.
Great.
And our group, when we discussed our breakout session, was really West Road was kind of the main topic. We had the engineer from that original project in our group. And so that was interesting to hear his take on why they chose to do what they did on West Road in order to help people cross the busy road from the bike trail. But it's really it's most of what we discussed in our group, and it seemed like because those were high up on the ranking that West Road is kind of getting so much of the attention, and I think that's fine if that's really what everyone wants, as a town, but it also feels a little bit like there's so many other good projects that, I'd want to spread it out a little bit.
Right. Now, did you have a chance to talk with them when you were talking about that topic, Lindsay, about one of the things that we've been talking about is improving on that West Road and putting a light there. Was there any discussion of that, or was it just on what has already been done?
Mostly what has already been done and why it was done there.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
So, I'd make just a couple of comments. And one thing I want to remind everybody is that we're sort of thinking about two buckets when we're thinking about Complete Streets. We're thinking about the Complete Streets funding program, which is part of MassDOT. But bigger than that, we're thinking about the language of our policy, actually, which is a commitment to have any infrastructure projects do to the best of our ability, improve access and safety for all users, including automobiles and trailers and bicycles. And, so for me, what that means is that whenever a project is being planned and developed, that first and foremost, we are thinking about, while we're doing this project, what can we be doing to improve access and safety for everyone? So we, in addition to that, we may choose, if the town has the funding for it, some projects that might not necessarily be on the list to repave or whatever, re-sewer, and develop some safety measures there. So for example, Beach Road might not be on the agenda for a while for any substantive, but that doesn't mean that we can't dream and plan and try to the best of our ability to improve safety access there. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's the sidewalk or even necessarily the bike, dedicated bike lane, although both of those would be wonderful. But it's some of the other small things that have already been done by traffic and parking, such as putting some speed reminders and things of that nature. So the idea is that all of our attention is on that. And so you're absolutely right, Stephanie. We have to be thinking of combining funding, which is why we're looking at this, community preservation fund as a source of additional funding. One of the other things that I wanted to mention is that it's become really clear to me, and I'd love your opinion of this. You may not have as much of an opinion because I seem to be more in the throes of this just because of my longevity with it, but it seems to me as though we need to really get clear, and Meph, this is where you could be helpful, I think, in what is the process, as we're going forward with any of these things. Where does the plan originate? Who next has to approve the plan? Because for us, what we sort of found in the last month, as we were starting to pursue funding from the Community Preservation Fund, is that there were reminders to us that there were some process pieces that kind of weren't in place. So we were kind of hearing both go forward, seek the funding, which we absolutely should be doing. But then as we were trying to seek the funding, we hadn't completely, evidently done the process. So for example, even though that Overland Way Road or connector, that multi-use path that you received a draft application for, even though that didn't even originate with us, that's been something that's evidently been floating around out there for a while as a potential project. We got really behind it because the more we thought about connecting that kind of isolated community that's bisected by 6A, it just seems like a wonderful thing. Who wouldn't want to do that? But then it became clear that it wasn't just a matter of us making the application and getting the money. We had to do a few other things, which is appropriate. I'm not suggesting it's not appropriate. It's just like, where's the process and who's in charge of the process? How do we ensure that the next project, whether it's, because West Road's another one that's kind of spinning in outer space, right? It's a top priority on the plan. It's been on everybody's agenda, maybe too much so, and yet we can't get consensus around what more should be done there. There was a suggestion by Cape Cod Commission that we have a flashing light there. Well, there's other folks that don't think we should have a flashing light there. So clearly it needs a process in order to make those determinations. So that's my only feedback on that process, is that the process was not designed to do that, what I just described. But clearly, if it's a plan that has any value, we need to be clear on, okay, so how do we then start implementing that plan, right?
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear comments from any of you, including Meph, on that topic.
Well, this year is a little bit of an anomaly, right? Because everybody got sort of on the bandwagon of looking for CPC funding, and it was all very last minute, because by the time everybody, your committee as well as the Recreation Committee, had kind of gotten ready to say, okay, this is what we want to do, the application deadline was looming. So there wasn't a lot of time to sort of follow a process. And so in my mind, the Complete Streets is George Meservy's baby, right? Isn't that, I mean, isn't he sort of the person in charge of that?
Well, initially, when we had to go through the policy, yes, George was assigned that, I believe, by John Kelly. But then my understanding is, Meph, that George kind of passed the baton on to Scott. So,
McDonald?
Yeah.
That's not, that's not, I think, the appropriate thing to do, because Scott's the chairman of the pedestrian and the pedestrian safety committee, right?
Yeah,
Traffic and safety.
Traffic and
safety.
Which clearly there's overlap with what you're doing. I mean, with the recreation department, the planning department, the pedestrian, the traffic and pedestrian safety committee. I'm not sure that Scott McDonald views himself as being in charge of, you know, what you're doing in terms of getting CPC money for, funding these projects. I think that his committee would be very important for signing, for agreeing that project should be done. They're probably the best one. Probably the best one to have carried that forward is George. But if he's not going to do it, I think that we'll just sort of have to figure out. But I think the place to get it all figured out is that committee. Anything you want to do that involves the roadways is going to have to be from them. If you were doing bike path stuff that wasn't connected to the road at all, then I think that it's probably totally in your lap.
But we're,
If I could just, one more comment is, it seems as though traffic and parking, and this is maybe another argument for why we should try to merge those committees into something that's more uniform and robust to handle these things. But it seems as though since DPW is on that committee, and ultimately, as I said in an email to Tom, of course we've got to follow Tom's advice. Tom ultimately is the one that has to implement these things, right? So that would make a lot of sense to me. But again, we probably should be clear on, so what's the process? And you're right, Meth, that we were all kind of last minute on this. Not really, but kind of in the big scheme of things, right? A couple months is sort of last minute. And so maybe what we need to do is to vet these possibilities in a way where a vote is actually taken, because it's not that these things have not been discussed with the various folks, but maybe we need to ratchet it up a little bit to say, okay, we're putting forward this proposal. We want to vote to know that this is the right time and everybody's supportive, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the right committee to do that, to get the vote from. But the only thing I'm saying is not everything that you are going to want to do relates to them. It's not a complete overlap. There's going to be things that you want to do that don't have anything to do with them. In which case, you're going to have to sort of be the one proposing it.
well, when I think of it, and we say, well, not everything that we want to do has overlap with them. What doesn't? Because it's like every bike, I mean, it isn't like we have a nice bike trail going through the woods that's independent of our streets. We don't.
Right.
Everything.
In the sense that the DPW does all the work.
Yeah.
That's where the DPW sits on a committee. So you could say that there is total overlap. And that probably is the best process, is to, work now that this year is kind of over, for the CPC funding anyways. But if there's things that might need money that's not going to come from CPC, then you're on a different schedule, because the budget schedule all culminates in May, but it really gets put together all winter long, whereas the CPC money doesn't start going until November.
And it's the coordination. Lindsay, I'm sorry, you had a thought too on this.
Yeah, I was just wondering if that was the route we would go, to have the vote with that particular traffic and safety committee. That makes lots of sense. I know Tom is always going to have a strong opinion on these projects, so I think he should be included in the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
George,
Well,
really
I guess,
too, Scott.
yeah, I guess my whole question would be the function of the committee. Where I'm on open space committee, it's very clear what the function of that committee is, which is, you find an opportunity to open space, you go to the town asking the town for the funds. But in something like this, it isn't like it's cut and dry. I mean, there's everything that you do is going to have, the DPW, most especially the DPW involved. And so I guess as a citizen volunteer committee, I guess my question is, what role is it that we play? I mean, if we're not decision makers, we're not professionals, we're just interested citizens working on things. And how do we fit into the scheme of getting these projects done?
I doubt that we're going to get this all figured out tonight, but I think there's an ongoing place for your committee, because all you're really going to get on the traffic and pedestrian safety committee, you're going to get one seat. I mean, so somebody's going to go and represent your committee at those meetings, but it's your committee that's going to be, sort of grass from the bottoms up, looking for, bicycling and walking and other kinds of individual activities that you might see a need for, or they think people want, and then you would work, figure it out and take it up to the safety, the traffic committee.
Mhm.
Do you see what I'm saying? Because I mean, I think that your group is, you're the representative of the biking and walking interests in the town,
Right.
which is not what the traffic
Right.
committee orientation
Right.
is.
Right. That's not their main interest. Right.
I don't know if that helps at all.
Yeah, well, I mean, our charge basically, and maybe we need to take a look at that at some point, but the charge basically says, we provide ideas and guidance and suggestion to the select board, but it's not really, it's not this, the select board doesn't want to be hearing all of these things, I don't think, firsthand. So maybe the trick is that when there's a project that we want to push forward, we just take it to the traffic and parking if it involves DPW.
Or you could be a subcommittee of that committee. Do you know what
Maybe
I'm saying?
Yeah. Meth, one of the things that kind of worries me too is not just the individual projects, but the sort of the keeper of complete streets. Who is that? Or we've been trying to be that, but we are not, I believe, and we should check this out with George, but I believe he did pass sort of keeper of complete streets on to Scott.
I don't see how he could have done that.
Yeah.
And I don't really see Scott accepting it either.
So maybe my understanding, we better discuss it with them, because my understanding is different. And so maybe what we need to do is just get clear about that, so that we know as a committee really who to go to, that we know will put things forward, as opposed to just delaying. I mean, we don't mind delaying when we have a firm answer. And I think this is appropriate for citizens, whether we ask individually or we ask as a volunteer committee. We understand that, but when we just don't really make progress and we're not really clear why, that's tricky.
So do you think you should be the Complete Streets Committee instead of the Bike and Pedestrian Committee?
No, that was what I was going to just suggest, Alice. You're talking about complete streets, but there's many other, I mean, there's ADA funding, there's CPC funding. None of those really have to do with complete streets. They are independent items. The complete streets did give a roadmap of things that can be looked at, and it did give a good prioritization, but it seems to me that our depth should be much greater than just complete streets. That's just one funding area.
I would agree with that, except that we've been doing this complete streets process for so long. It would be nice to have, the process come to some sort of a, relative conclusion right now. Like I want to
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about some dates for that. And then I totally agree that, going more in depth with different funding sources is really smart. But I do want to see, like, I feel like the complete streets things keeps getting pushed and we keep talking about CPC funds and other funds. And I just want to say, like, whoa, let's talk about this other thing that we were doing and just figure out to that so that we can.
Yeah. Well, in the breakout that I was in for the complete streets, when we were talking about that, we were talking about the $400,000. Now, was that a yearly amount? Was that a one-time amount that the town would just get from complete streets? And the person that was, I forget the name of the person that was the head of on my committee, but he very much felt that complete streets were never, he said, you're never going to get $400,000. He said, you're only going to get, project by project, you're going to get some funding, but you're not going to just, get $400,000. And so I just felt like, well, we've got the regular town budget where there should be monies. There should be like 3 or 4 other places that there are pots of monies that we should go after. And complete streets is one of them, but we shouldn't like not work on all of these other things. We should do it all simultaneously, I felt. And he gave me the impression that that was the way they considered it, that it was just one funding source that we could work with.
Right. You're absolutely right about that. But please be mindful that the complete streets is simply the umbrella of practices that one would want to see in order to have a safe, accessible community. The funding is a separate thing. So when you sign on, and if you want to review the policy that the town adopted, that will give you a real good insight into what the difference is. Because the policy basically, so going back, so far, one of the reasons this committee decided to get so behind complete streets is that everything that we had in our charge and everything that we were talking about and working towards all fell under the practices of complete streets.
Right.
Okay, so that's why we got so behind it, because it made so much sense.
Great.
But
Yeah, it's a great umbrella.
As those projects are identified and they're prioritized, they're intended to be a roadmap going forward. So, if some work is going to be done on West Road, look at these suggestions for improving that for pedestrians, or it could be a priority that the town says, or as you noted, Stephanie, we could all agree, the town agrees, the town planner, the select board, everybody need to put some emphasis on improving access on Beach Road. Then we look to that as a guidepost, and then we have to seek the funding ourselves. $400,000, even if we were to get it tomorrow.
Yeah, that's not going to do anything.
It's not going to do it. So
no.
Yeah, so that's what we do. And we have, as Lindsay can testify, we have tried to look to Safe Routes to Schools as a good funding stream, and it is. As you know, Harwich got $649,000 from just Safe Routes to Schools for a sidewalk to their school. So, combine $600,000 with $400,000. If you have a project that's $1 million, and now all of a sudden we're in the ballpark and we're really apt to make some progress. So so I think we're on the right track, and I would suggest that as we're, so far the only project we've done that hasn't really been sort of roadway and byway focused has been our pamphlet, our publicity, kind of our informational pamphlet. So everything else has kind of been in that ballpark.
Yeah,
So,
Ellen,
yeah.
I'm sitting here reading your charge, And it occurs to me that one way of thinking of the complete streets segment of your work is that is all infrastructure.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of things on this charge that are not infrastructure related. I mean, I'm looking at one. Um, um, and let's see.
There's an
Um,
education charge, for example.
yeah, there is an education piece. Future bike routes. Now that's probably just the watershed to South Orleans thing. But there is something about finding width in the uh,
Right. I could pull it up too.
so there's other stuff. Now some of it may still involve Tom Daly, but it is not infrastructure stuff, and it isn't going to be CPC stuff because CPC is totally for capital projects.
Mhm.
Uh, so um, understand the town's rights and constraints to land immediately adjacent to priority roads. Um,
Yeah, that's kind of,
that would be a very nice piece of information to put in because every time it comes up, nobody knows which road is laid out, which is not laid out, which
Yep.
road that's not laid out actually has some opportunities to be widened.
Mhm.
And that would be, if you started from the top down on the priority roads, I don't think you'd ever get down into the little tiny roads, but the main roads it'd be good. That'd be a good piece of information to have.
yeah, and along with the charge of the alternative bike routes, it was, a lot of people did have the watershed in mind, but Meth, the suggestion that's, I think it was Stephanie that made, that we look to Poche Road and, what's the other one?
Cedarland,
Yeah,
Cedarland,
Cedarland, yeah, as a way around,
a lot of Beach Road.
yeah, to get around a lot of Beach Road, to get closer to Nauset without having to ride on busy Beach Road. Those are all really good suggestions. But again, that could be on the complete streets priority list, right?
Yes.
So, okay, well, any sort of um, summary comments in regards to that? I mean, I will continue as long as I'm chair, and Lindsay, I want to be sure we get you on the meeting notice too for traffic and parking, so that if you're able to join, but one or the other of us should join, and we can certainly ask another member if we're not, but we should have somebody on those meetings probably every time. I've made most of them. It's actually pretty easy now that it's Zoom.
Mhm.
But you ought to take some time and just think about this charge and read it. One thing that could be added to this charge would be the idea that you would have an official representative on the traffic safety committee, and that would be sort of formalizing. And I think that's what Scott McDonald has been trying to get for a while.
Mhm. Yeah, well, he's talked about merging them, but I think that last piece is maybe a better way to go. Just have an official person, so a voting member of the committee, right, Matt?
Right. Right.
Yeah, that sounds good to me too. I wonder if there's any difference between having our own committee that has a voting member on that committee or being a subcommittee of the traffic and safety. Is there any difference there? Or is that just words?
I think having a vote around that table is worth it.
Yeah, I think that would be a much better way to do it than to try to say you're a subcommittee. Yeah.
Yeah. Although we could be a subcommittee with a voting member.
Yes, you could do both. You
Right.
could do both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Like, is there a reason to be a subcommittee?
To think about it, I can't, that's a good thought, Lindsay. I don't know, did anything come to your mind? I mean, I think
Well,
the idea of being involved is to kind of close some of these communications loops, be sure we're really, kind of looking after our interests, which are, which we have in our charge.
I just wonder if being a subcommittee that really takes away, I mean, now you're just kind of an offshoot and you really don't have your own agenda other than that as a subcommittee to traffic and safety. I guess, just that word subcommittee makes me feel like, well,
Less than. sounds like less.
substandard, yeah, that less than a real
I was-
committee. You're not
Yeah,
a
I was
real
just
committee.
wondering if it had any, brought any benefit or any more, perhaps, a more of a vote or something like that, but perhaps it doesn't, and we can maintain as we are and just try to get a voting member on that committee. That'd be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that would be a great idea.
Let's welcome Joan. Hi, Joan.
Hi, Joan.
You can hear we're talking.
Phone before, but I heard most of the whole meeting.
Oh,
I
good.
just couldn't tell you I was on because I was driving and Zooming at the same time, so.
Neff, quick question for you. To have a voting member, do we need a charter change?
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
whatever.
that would, the Traffic and Safety Committee, I'm gonna have to look this up, I think was a creation of town meeting. So it may be a little bit more cumbersome than it sounds like in our conversation, but I think you would be, I think Scott McDonald would be in favor of that. So I think it can be done, and maybe it'd be a Maytown meeting warrant article.
Do we need to, why don't, if it's going to wait until May, then I would suggest that we all think about this. And, I'm in favor of it because I do think it would give us a little more clout. But why don't we revisit this and take a vote on it? Meanwhile, Matthew, you could check perhaps to see if it does require.
I'll find all that. I'll find all that out.
Yeah, and I'll plug back in with Scott. He and I are in touch quite a bit and let him know that what we're suggesting now is rather than a full merger to have a voting member. I know he wants to have some citizenry on his committee. He really only has one citizen now, and that fellow just came on. That would be Doug Prentice, who just came on.
And he's only a semi-citizen.
Is he?
He's like, he spent his whole career doing what Tom Daly does.
Yeah.
That was his. He was a town staff for other towns.
Right.
Oh, really? Which, but not Orleans, Matt?
No, I think he was off Cape.
Oh,
Wait.
okay.
He wasn't the one who did the West Road?
Yes, he was.
Oh,
But
okay, yeah.
I think he might have been working for the state.
Oh,
In the state DOT maybe.
Okay.
But yeah, he's been in charge of a couple of the intersections in Orleans, that probably being the biggest.
He's a civil engineer, Matt?
Yeah. He's great. I mean, he's a good asset on that committee, but
Yeah.
I'm not aware that he's a bicyclist.
right. Yeah. I think whatever would bring more clarity to the process would be my vote, helping, us all understand, me in particular, understand the process so that we can, help to get things done in a way that makes sense and just a time frame that feels good to everybody. I know that these things take a long time, months and years, but it does feel so frustrating when we get caught up in just, who do we talk to for this? Like what? Oh, we missed this step because we didn't know who to talk to, and we didn't know that there was that step. So just having that clarity.
Right.
I think all the committees in town that are effective become effective because they are like consistent over a period of time, and they aren't trying to get everything done in 1 year, but pick and choose and get one or two things done in a year, but keep at it year after year after year. And sooner or later, you look at and you realize that you've come a long way.
Yeah, that's good advice. So with that in mind, I think what we could maybe make a note for the minutes, Peter, is just to say that we had this discussion that we all seem supportive of asking for a voting member from the Bike and Pedestrian Committee onto the Traffic and Parking. MEF will look into what's required and when for that, and we can take a vote at our next meeting to be sure that people have had a chance to think about that, maybe explore it, and be sure that we're all in agreement. How's that sound? Okay.
Okay.
So we're having an identity crisis is really what it.
Yeah, well, you know, I think Lindsay said it really, really well. It was disappointing to miss the Complete Streets funding deadline for this fall. You know, and now we're waiting, and we don't have access to that money until potentially spring. But boy, if we miss that in May, then we're going to be back to, you know, again, losing an opportunity to move forward on some of these projects with that funding until the following fall. So it's really important to stay on top of it. Joan, before we move on to the next agenda item, we were debriefing the Cape Cod Commission's meeting for Complete Streets. Did you have anything that you wanted to share with us in terms of your thoughts on that, suggestions, anything? I did mention that I have a little list of my own suggestions for changing the priorities as they are. We're supposed to get those to either MEF or George. And I made my list. I'm going to send them just from myself, and I will resend the list that the committee made. But I
think there was a couple of things, and one that I think we all discussed before when we got the estimates for the projects. There was not a lot of meat behind what those estimates were. And Alice, I mean, you asked about, 10 times just for the 2 projects we were looking for. And I do think the select board asked the same question. Kevin asked the same question of, well, what's behind this? And my disappointment was there's not a lot behind it. And I'm not even so sure that the way that the priorities were put together, that there was alignment behind. And someone, I think Andrea brought up, well, is the priority to get more access to kids with families that can't walk to school? Like, how are the priorities put together? So I sort of feel like it's a running list of potential ideas, which is great. But I'm not so sure it gave us the most direction based on how accurate are those estimates, and then what were the priorities and who aligned to the priorities. So those are my 3 disappointments. And I do agree, Alice, the fact we missed even applying for funding in the fall, I think was a miss, because your team did a lot of work. I mean, I joined this later, but I would hate to see it missed again in April.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that message of thin data behind these projects is huge, because if we are left to, not us as a committee, but the town of Orleans is left to fill in all of those blanks, or if every single project needs an engineering study, to tell you honestly, and I mentioned this, I think, to you, Joan, I did a tour of the Overland Way area, both from the bike trail on my bike and from the car the other way. And I thought, this is not a grand project. This is a tiny little 0.2 of a mile path that, we could go throw some gravel down there and it would be an improvement, but we'd like to see it, something that is really fitting and that is a spur of the Cape Cod Rail Trail, and that really is a good, but to keep putting it off just doesn't make an awful lot of sense. So we will submit that grant. So thank you for those comments, Joan. I am going to send an email with some of these comments to the commission. The next item is to.
Can I just ask you on that, Ally?
Yeah.
If the engineering study, it gets done in a timely way, is that a project that you would think about asking for a grant from the Complete Streets program rather than the CPC for funding?
Well, we could, again, any
money that can come from outside of the town's pockets is great.
Well,
But Meth, what,
yeah.
but the timing would be, we wouldn't find out if we got the 20 grand until July of next
No,
year.
no, you'll know that you won't have it to spend though, right, right.
Right.
Yeah.
So that might not work.
Well, it wouldn't work for this cycle. Yeah. I mean,
Right.
if we could, you know, and again, these things, we really need the authorities to help us with this, and including Tom. I mean, what is the appropriate timing? Because, you know, if you think that between funding a project, designing a project, and actually implementing a project could be on a narrow time frame, you know, a year and a half, but more realistically, it might be a
Give or
2
take.
year, right?
No, yeah, it's gonna be more than that, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I guess,
Lot
I
more
guess
than that.
I wonder, Alice and everyone, I would think that if we took that list and gave it to Tom Daly and said to Tom and Ron, you guys are the experts at this, what's the most valuable project you think we can get done?
Yeah, I totally agree. I feel like that's definitely the route we need to have him in the room because he always has a strong opinion and he knows what, you know, how long things take and what they cost. And I
Right.
would think we need his opinion on that.
Right,
Yeah.
and just let him say, here are the top two, go after these. I mean, they were all good ideas, so why not go down that route and then push to get them done? Because the CPC timing is off enough that we wouldn't be able to apply for the spring. If we got the study back, we can apply in September for the next round of the fall funding, if there is any.
Right.
But, you know, maybe Tom has such, and he knows all this, because I had a great conversation with him, Steffi and I did, about the whole cost of putting sidewalks down. And maybe he'll just give us some better direction to say, this is a great list, go after these two, and let's get something on the board.
Yeah, those are good. That's a good suggestion. So if we were to do that, again, does that come one-on-one with Tom? It doesn't seem appropriate. Does it go through traffic and safety? Does it go?
Well, what if, all right,
What's
Alice,
the path?
you've said that we've missed the fall deadline. All right, so what we're looking at now is we've got 6 months to get to the spring deadline. If we take that CPC list ourselves, and I'm not sorry, the CPC, the complete streets list ourselves. And if it, right now we're saying what we're going to be going after for CPC is the engineering for Overland and Bay Ridge. But what else? And I think Lindsay was right when she was saying there's been so much focus on West Road, and now we're focusing a lot of attention on that particular thing. What else do we as a committee want to say that we want to put in for an application in May? Shouldn't we start deciding that now and not be like 2 months up against it, not know, but right now make the decision out of that complete streets list within the next month, decide which items we're going to go after from complete streets for the spring application.
But I think it's Tom, Stephanie. I think
Yeah.
Tom
Oh,
and
I
Ron
think
know so much.
absolutely.
Let them tell us which one to
Absolutely.
go after.
Yeah.
And
Well,
which
we're-
needs an engineering study, because, you know,
We
they have to
we've
guide
already-
us.
If we submit this, the request for the engineering study tomorrow, then that's already in the hopper, because we're going to hope that we're going to get that, and then we need to be kind of on our toes, ready for, okay, you know, how are we going to fund that to implement? And it would probably, the timing would work fine to consider the complete streets funding for that. I think that what we need to do is probably get Tom and George together with this committee to express that this is what we would like to do. And then we could, as you suggested, ask, okay, so then what would be priority number 2? Because we've already, you know, we've got to assume we're already kind of down the path of Overland Way, right? If we submit that grant application, it's because we think it's the right thing to do. And that's got to be submitted by Monday. So I'm planning to submit it as soon as you all say, oh, go ahead today. Tomorrow, it's ready to go. Right? So does that make sense? And maybe what we should do is, we can send this message to George and Tom that simply says, you know, kind of have this dilemma. We've gone ahead now. Thank you for your support in applying for the engineering. We're going to make an assumption that we're going to move forward on that. We'd like to be sure the timing dovetails with the Complete Streets funding stream. And we also would like your opinion of what is a doable project on that list for project number 2.
Right.
But remember, and that's probably the right thing to do, but in asking for that kind of is different from what does the community see as the top priority projects, which is what the Cape Cod Commission has been doing with us, simply because that is a requirement by MassDOT.
Right.
But Alice, I think it actually might be project number 1, because you want to apply to Complete Streets in April. And you're not going to know about Overland. You're not going to do the engineering study until we get the money in July. But what can we apply for in the spring with Complete Streets? To me, that's the question.
You're right, Joan, but I'm honestly, I'm not sure about the timing myself. I know the next cycle to submit is in May, I believe. But, that's assuming that Cape Cod Commission finishes our prioritization plan, that George gets the plan submitted to the state for MassDOT so that MassDOT can tick it off as whatever. But I think that what I should do is send the message to George and Tom and say, what do you guys think is the next doable project? Maybe on the prioritization plan, you should list Overland as 1 and the other one as number 2. So when the state sees those, they'll realize. I think the Cape Cod Commission actually answered this question the other day. You don't have to apply for the funding for the one that's number 1 on your priority list. So we're good in that regard.
Yeah. Now, Joan, this is Stephanie Joan. Refresh my memory, but I thought that when you and I had that long conversation with Tom, I thought that he had said that the sidewalks on Main Street going all the way from, right where the library drops off there, all the way down to Beach Road, that was something that was already, I don't know if he just said on the radar of or in the plans for the town. Do you recall that?
Yeah,
that part of that
to me, Tom had knowledge of every sidewalk and every street at the top of his head. I mean, he knew the situation of everything. And he said it is his priority to do Main Street. Can they do it? Can they fund it? That I think is the unknown. But he knows the situation is bad. So, I don't think there's any funding for that at the current cost that we have, or I don't know if it's in any plan. But that's why I'm thinking we just go to Tom to say to Alice, to what you said, let's just say, what can we submit for? Because Tom does know all this, and he knows, even that section between Tonsit to the school, that's a priority for him because that's a busy intersection. So they do have priorities already, and he knows them all. I just think it's a lot of money. And Meph, as you said, anything that costs money right now is going to be a tricky bailiwick to address,
I feel like we've perhaps addressed the public comment portion of the Complete Streets just by having the list and having the public comment meetings so that people can, comment and bring other things up that they want to be on the list, and also just comment on the list itself. And we are part of the public, our committee. So I feel like that part has somewhat been satisfied. And I think that we do need to bring it to, the professionals to say, okay, so what can we do next? I think that would be helpful.
Well, what does the town have plans for? Are there plans? There's been studies done. The town has done, they did the Beach Road study twice. I don't know that they've ever done a Main Street study. I haven't seen that. Meph, do you know if they have done a Main Street study for sidewalks?
No, I don't think so. But Main Street is one of the laid out roads.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So they, I think,
So is Townsend, yeah.
yeah, is Tonsit laid out? I've
Yes,
asked
it
that
is.
question. It is,
It
okay.
is, yes, yeah. Tom told us that, didn't he, Joe? He
I don't
did
know, I'm
say.
so confused on the laid out and not laid out, and I just, I
But
mean, my
Townsend was.
recommendation would be, Alice, if you just met with Tom and said, here's the situation we're in, what do you think we should go after instead of another big group meeting? And how would you approach it, just as a one-on-one? I mean, I would think that that would be a good way to do it. You know,
But I don't know if if we're looking at citizen view can be different from what the town professionals have. And if as a citizen committee, we're representing the citizen view, and the citizen view is very strong that people want the Main Street sidewalks done, but that is an expensive project. That may not be what Tom would put as his number one priority, but it doesn't mean it's not the most important to the citizens of Orleans.
And if I could just, you know,
Right.
throw a few things in here. On those sidewalk issues, the ones that get really expensive are the ones that are engineered with curbs, and that's the way the state wants them. But you can do sidewalks that just rest on the ground, and the sidewalk in that stretch that you're talking about, like from the academy up to the cemetery,
Mhm.
is an existing sidewalk that grass has grown over and shrubs have grown out on, and the town is entitled to take that back and scrape up the grass and bring the tar back. But those kinds of laying a sidewalk like that is a lot less expensive than doing the full, like a downtown sidewalk.
Yes, but I thought that Tom had told us that the state required for a sidewalk construction, for new sidewalk construction, that it either have like some kind of I think it's 3 feet in between the sidewalk and the road, or a curb. That I thought that's what he had said. Do you remember that, Joe?
he said something like that. You're right, Stephanie. But that's why I think it's just worth going back to Tom and just getting it all straightened out. I don't,
Well,
because even if he said that and we can't do it, maybe we can do what Meth said. I just don't know.
Well, the sidewalk over by West Road, when you come out of the bike trail and turn left to go up towards Shaw's, there's a sidewalk all the way along there that's just rolled pavement on the ground. It has no curb cuts or anything like that. So
Okay, well, that would be great. Yeah,
more of
that
that
would
I
be a
think would
great
be
answer if
because
it could be
that's
done.
all people want.
Right.
It's just
Right.
to be able to be out of the travel lanes of the roads.
Mhm. I know, and
Yeah,
right
and
now,
So I have a question now. I think it feels like we've sort of beat this conversation around a lot, and maybe we can just vote that we're going to have the conversation with Tom and then move on to the next subject, because we're not going to answer anything here without having a conversation with Tom, I don't think.
well, what I would recommend doing is, rather than have a one-on-one conversation with Tom, I'd be inclined to draft a kind of a letter, an email to Tom and George, summarizing succinctly this message, that basically that we are, as they know, we're very committed to the prioritization plan, but we also want to see things move forward. And we wonder, from their opinion, which of those projects make sense to put in the top of the list that can actually get done. And that we have, as they know, I'll simply say, because I've sent them this draft, just this draft application, trying to seek some opinion, as well as just to be sure they're aware that we're doing this, to say that we're, seeking funding for this engineering study. And, we want to be sure that realistically it can be implemented, that we're willing to that we're recommending that Complete Streets funding be used there, and or we're willing to go again and ask for CPF funding, but we just want to be sure that it's going to be done and it's not going to just linger there as another study, another engineering study that just doesn't get implemented. Does that sound okay? And you would all be copied on that? And I would probably be inclined to copy John Kelly on this as well, Meph, if you think that that's appropriate. Because it's a matter of getting everybody's eyes on it and, you know, having a little bit of accountability here. Either say, no, we're not going to do this, or, you know, help us to get it done, right?
Well, but I'd like it to be more than just something about complete streets, because right now, complete streets, we're not addressing the main street sidewalks right now. And so what if in the letter we address that is something that is a top priority for people in town, and we would like to know where within the DPW prioritization or plans that sits. We know they want to do it. Where does it sit? And what is it that we can do to move that along? Not as part of complete streets, but just as part of the prioritization for the town DPW.
Right. Well, you know, the hope is that there aren't two different plans, that the prioritization plan would be the roadmap for DPW, or DPW would be helping to form that prioritization plan. It doesn't make sense that there'd be two separate.
You don't think that the town DPW has had in the past plans long before this complete streets came out? I thought that they did. I thought that the main street sidewalks were something that was very much in the priority of the town, and that didn't have to be just a part of complete streets.
Did we lose Alice?
I think we did. Yeah, I think we just lost Alice. Hopefully she can get back on.
Okay.
Oh, here comes Alice. I know I came late. I also have to leave in 10 minutes. It's just dealing with something.
I have a meeting at 6, so I'm pretty much on the last
10 minutes. So maybe, just because I do have to leave and Meph's got to leave, and we want to approve sending the application for CPC through, right, Alice?
Yes.
So we can vote on sending the application through, and then agree to have a letter sent to Tom, and to at least a conversation started with Tom and George and the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Sounds
Now,
good.
Sorry you lost me. I don't know what happened. It just kind of disappeared.
Alice, I have a question on, and I should have brought this up before. I've had a bad week. I'm sorry. But you talk about with the CPC application, you're referring to it as to Overland Way, but it also includes in the complete streets. It never refers to Overland Way. It refers to Bay Ridge. And it isn't just Overland Way. It also is Bay Ridge, right? So should we include Bay Ridge in that description?
Yeah. It mentions connecting those communities, so that the little pathway is simply between the bike path, the already identified, you know, the Cape Cod Rail path, and Overland Way, which connects to Bay Ridge.
Yes,
And
but I thought that also the project was going to encompass then bringing a bike path all the way down to Route 6A, down Bay Ridge. It wasn't just to be Overland Way. It was supposed to be all the way down to 6A on Bay Ridge, I thought.
No, well, I might have a different, my understanding was it was just to be able to get people safely to Bay Ridge Road. Bay Ridge Road is not it's pretty wide, and it's not a very busy road. You know, there's that little community of, is it Oak Ridge or something? Yeah. So my understanding was that it would simply connect, instead of bushwhacking your way.
Yeah, all right.
You see? And then the beauty of the thing is you could get right to the street light there at 6A, and you can safely cross And now you
Right.
can go up, Baker's Pond and those communities that are up there. I didn't realize there were so many communities on Long Ridge or whatever it is.
Yeah,
There's a lot of homes there.
there are.
Yeah.
All right. I guess I misunderstood that. I thought that it was not going to be just on Overland Way, that it was going to go all the way to 6A with a bike path.
No. And I think for the money that they were looking at for that, it would make sense that it was just going to be that stretch.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
My misunderstanding.
Yeah, no worries. So I will ask for a motion in regards to submitting the CPF application as drafted.
Motion to submit.
Okay, thank you, Joan.
Seconded.
Thank you, Stephanie. All those in favor? We've had quite a bit of discussion, so I'm assuming we're all set.
Aye.
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 Lindsay, I.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Stephanie, aye.
Joan, aye.
Great, Peter. Okay, and Alice, I. So it's a unanimous, and I will get that in following the guidelines. I will also draft that letter for Tom and George. One of the questions that I would ask before we finish, because I was lost in as Stephanie was raising the issue of the Main Street sidewalk. And Mev, here's another question for you. So, I remember I did bring those pictures to the select board, and folks were pretty appalled at how overgrown those sidewalks were. Should we make an assumption that that's going to be cleaned up? I mean, there's two issues here. One is redoing those sidewalks and making nice, fancy sidewalks, which would ultimately be great. But at the least, we should expect that we take back our property there and clean them up and forbid property owners from encroaching on public way.
When you talk to Scott, ask him whether he would be okay with you just requesting that be made an agenda item on their agenda. And then,
On traffic and parking?
yeah, because that's Tom Daly. I mean, and that's where I heard about that. Although I did, now that you mentioned it, I remember your pictures.
Yeah, and my understanding at that select board meeting was that the chair asked Tom to see that that was cleaned up. Should we make an assumption that that will be done?
No. But let me ask that question tonight if there's time at the end of the meeting.
Okay, that would be great. And if there isn't time, just shoot me an email and I will follow up to be sure that we at least have an answer to that. I don't want, that's just a great example of how things kind of get lost in the.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Matt. Okay, guys, great thinking. Anybody else have any parting shots?
I just wanted to say that that's where our squeaky wheel committee gets, little things done like that.
Right.
By just keep poking and asking for those things to happen.
I sometimes I call it gentle but relentless pressure, Lindsay.
I love it.
The main thing is to get it in writing on someone's agenda with a responsibility for it, because it doesn't go away then until it's taken care of.
Yeah. And there are process strategies to help so everybody doesn't have to keep track of all these little boring details, right? So we'll work on that as well. Okay, guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we will be in touch. Now, listen, the December meeting is around Christmas time too. I'm wondering if we should have our next meeting in January after the first of the year.
Sure.
Any thoughts on that? It's going to come up pretty quick. I think we usually do.
Maybe we can just keep the date we have, Alice, and then see if we have anything back from
That
George
sounds
and
great.
Tom.
That
Yeah,
sounds great.
that sounds good.
We'll be nimble within like
Yeah.
2 weeks before. How's that sound?
Yeah, I think that's good.
All right,
All right.
guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Meeting
you.
adjourned,
Good night.
Peter, at 5:41. We'll adjourn and send me whatever you've got.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.